I'll echo what Michelle just said. We've started. This is nowhere near as far along the line as the PMC testing is. We've been presenting about PMC tests for 2 years at least. This is the first time we've presented on PMEs. So it's an interesting challenge in that, unlike PMC testing, what's happening here? No, that's right. I skipped a slide. Sorry, I've got presenter mode on there, and I thought I was on the next slide already. Okay, so quickly, I'll go through the challenge. Then there is a proposal for how we are going to do PME testing, which I've shared with 2 or 3 vendors, had some feedback. And the purpose of this session is to get more feedback. Talk about the next steps, and then hopefully a discussion. I want a discussion. We need a discussion. So, the challenge. Unlike the PMC testing, where we can write effectively, test suite is for the PMCs, it's a test harness, which invokes the PMC. And we can do anything we like to that PMC to test it. To test the PME, the process modeling environment is in control of the life cycle. We can't control it. It's all done from the user interface of the PME. So we can't do what we did with the PMCs, and we can't mandate the order of the interactions between PME and the PMC. We can't control. The only person who can control is the end user of the PME, which is not us. So, and every PME has a different user interface. So we can't write something that interacts with the user interface because every one of them is different. So we've had to come up with a solution that works with those constraints and allows us to do the testing in a way that makes sure we've done the testing to it and tested everything, but in a way that meets those challenges. And Loic and Jasper spent a good number of hours earlier in the year looking at how we were going to do this. And they went round and round in circles a few times, I think I can safely say, Jasper, before they came up with this. This is a diagram that sits in the executive summary of the document. It's a design document. The rest of it goes into incredible detail. Not yet enough detail. It's not something I would suggest anybody tries to read at this stage. But we have a 2-page executive summary, the heart of which is this diagram. And which gadget am I meant to be using? It does work just. Can you see that?
It doesn't work well because it's a glass on which you are pointing, so it doesn't work with that, I guess.
Okay.
So you need to point with your finger.
I need to point with the fingers. Can I point with the mouse?
Yeah. If you can use the mouse.
No, the mouse is working on the other screen. Okay, I have to talk you through it. Yeah, probably easier for the people. So, left-hand side there, we've got the PME under test. Down the bottom, we have the agent, which is driving the entire test process, which is an end user, or from a survey we did of all the vendors a couple of years back, automation framework. And there's various levels of automation framework, from doing all the testing manually to actually using a framework to drive the testing so you can just capture the test process and rerun it by pressing a single button. So that section down there is what really exists currently. It's how you do your testing, it's how you drive your PME. Back. So what we have come up with, what Jasper and Loic have come up with, is CAPE-OPEN, CO-LaN will provide a test controller, and it will provide 2 test PMCs, property package and the unit operation. So what will happen is that test PMC will be instantiated in the simulation environment, the modeling environment, by the end user, by the agent, but then we'll talk to the test controller. So the test controller will provide a workflow to the agent, to the end user, telling them this is what you need to do next. Drop the test PMC into your flow sheet. Connect port into unit operation. Connect the ports to a stream. Do this, do that, and it will guide the end user through the steps that are required. The test controller will also store the current state of the tests and the configuration. So if a test requires the PME to be closed and reopened, the test controller knows where we've got to. So the test controller is telling us what we need to do. It's storing where we've got to and what the results are. And it contains the complete test workflow. So that when you've worked all the way through the test workflow, you've completed the tests. The test PMC will work like a normal PMC, but will talk to the controller, pass back the results, and the two will talk to each other. So that is how we pull out the results from the tests, out the test PMC, back so we can report them. So it doesn't come out via the normal PME user interface. The other thing the test controller will do will configure test PMCs. We do not use the normal method for configuring PMCs in the PME because not all PMEs support the edit functionality on all types of PMC. We can't guarantee that that functionality is there. Therefore, the test controller will be used to configure the test PMC. That's why there's a nice big red cross on IK Utilities edit from the end user to the PME. We don't use it. It will come from the test controller. So the test controller will then also produce the reports and produce any logs that we want to produce. That's not logging. That's not what CAPE does, but it is logs of the tests and so on, separate from the report. So the end user will talk to the test controller using their mouse and keyboard. They'll talk to the PME. Reports and logs. And then we've got the so-called command line controller. I just realised that we've used a different terminology here to we use for the PMC, where we call it a command line interface. We probably want to be consistent. But the command line controller is an alternate way of controlling the test controller. So that if you're using an automation framework, you haven't got to talk to a user interface, you can talk to a command line interface. And you can integrate that into the automation framework, and everything you can do directly to the test controller, you can also do via the command line controller. This is how we envisage using automation. That all is clear as mud. Total pushback. So the way you'd automate this, so the first step to do this is you run through it once with an end user, a developer or an experienced end user running this system. So it's that person. So they'll follow the instructions, they'll do all the steps they need to do in the PME. PME will test PMC, will talk to the test controller, you'll get your reports. To automate that, you do exactly the same thing, but we are assuming that the automation framework allows you to capture everything you do. So the first time you do it, you power up your automation framework. It's talking to the command line controller rather than the test controller, but you go through all those same steps. The automation framework captures them all. So you can replay it. And therefore you can do the same set of tests without having to do it manually every time. And that's basically the proposal. Have I missed anything? Oh, and it will talk, as with the PMC, the test suite for PMCs, all the communication, the CAPE-OPEN communication is via Cobia. Have I missed anything? Yes, anything important? Yes, but I've missed lots of things. But
No, I think it's the big picture.
Lovely, thank you. Did I just hear a ping on the? No. So, just to summarise, CO-LaN will provide the test PMCs, property package unit operation. That provides the interfaces exercised that need to be tested and exercised and tested from within the PME. So you're testing all the interfaces implemented in the PME, and it will relay the results and back to the test controller, and any information about triggered events will be relayed back. The test controller obviously communicates with the test PMC, and it allows the configuration of the test PMC. They're both done, those two things are done from the test controller. So it will guide the end user through the workflow, maintains the test, and produces the test reports and logs. So that's just a summary of what I've just said. The command line controller, it's there as an alternate way of making use of the test controller, and absolutely enables you to do the automation, as long as the automation framework can talk to a command line. So, and that's one of the things we've been validating in the conversations I've already had with vendors and everybody I've so far talked to, which is not very many of you, have said, yeah, that will work with our choice of automation test framework. So we are not mandating anything about the test framework. That is what you choose to use. And if you've got your own in-house one, you use a third-party one, whatever, it should work. But that is certainly one thing I'd like feedback on today. There are, in the executive summary, there are 3 prerequisites, all related to Cobia. Publish Cobia phase 3, Cobia interface for inter-process communication, and Cobia language bindings to support the windowing technology. I'm not sure if they are correct prerequisites, or whether, because certainly the published Cobia phase 3 may be more than we require. It's just one part of that, I think.
No, we need the current phase 3 published because we need the marshalling between the two applications.
Okay, it's the current phase 3. The word current should be in there, I think. There is other things in phase 3 that haven't been done yet that we don't need.
That's a different story.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm not sure that language bindings are in the current Cobia roadmap for the near future, so that might be a bit of a mismatch.
They become a prerequisite only if we decide on a particular set of windowing framework, which we haven't decided on.
Yes.
So, for example, if we want to use Windows Forms, we're going to need a .NET binding.
Yeah. So we might need 1 or 2 bindings to be done, even if they're not currently on the Cobia roadmap for 2024. So, next steps. We already have a work package put together for completing that design document, extending that design document. It's very high level at the moment. And so it's going to include, we've got to include the design of the components, the interfaces and the workflow, the choice of the windowing technology, obviously affect the language bindings, any architecture decisions, and there's a little bit of a discussion going on around in process versus out of process, and the data structures. This project will actually, work package will actually produce what Loic has called an ultra minimal proof of concept. But that will also enable the vendors to actually test it. No, not test it, review it, I think is a better way of putting that. And to see whether the ideas actually work in practice. You won't be able to do very much with it, but you'll at least be able to review it and say, yep, that looks like we're going in the right direction. Well, no, we've not gone in the right direction at all, we need to revisit. And in 2024, we want to develop a full prototype. So, short and sweet presentation. Wanted to leave time for discussion. Just make sure covered all the other things that weren't in the presentation that I wanted to, which I have. So that's the outline of Test Suite for PME. Questions, thoughts, suggestions?
So the test controller, it doesn't communicate with the end user with like message boxes, or how's it going to guide the user?
It will pop up a workflow. It may have one of the things. So it will pop up a series of steps. There will be a window there that says you do this.
Sort of modulus ILO.
But like,
But if you're working by the command controller, it will probably be someone different. Otherwise, you'd be avoiding the ability to test on habit.
But it may also, I think we've also discussed the possibility of checkboxes. I've done that step so that the test controller knows you think you've done that step. But if it doesn't have the correct results back from the test PMC, you can actually check that the correct things have been done. But yes, that it will guide you. It will pop up something that guides you through that workflow.
As a PME provider, Michael, any more thoughts?
no, I mean, I've already kind of someone talked to them.
Michael is one of the vendors I've probably talked to.
Okay.
But especially with the command line. Like command line, I should will return actually come.
To be decided upon. I'm not sure whether that's enough or whether you need to keep the thing alive to run multiple tests, in which case you'd be better off with adjacent output products.
Oliver, you wanted to intervene?
That's a question to Michael. To what extent is the process simulator being, is it possible to automate it to every level of the graphical user interface?
Yeah, pretty much everything.
So
Ours is a lot.
I'm wondering whether it's possible to simplify this design. And I think that most of the PMEs are, it is possible to automate them. That the PMC is triggering a request for, let's say, open the fluid package dialog, which is an abstract command. And then you must step in with your process simulator and say, okay, open the property package window means my automation framework calling these commands. So you put this translation, let's say, of these abstract commands beside in the test suite, and then if the PMC is able to trigger the PME via these commands.
So the PMC, the test PMC, would then have to know what the commands are for every single simulator.
Yeah, because the point is then the PMC triggers a command to the PME, the PME is reacting on these commands, and then the result can also be confirmed or blocked by the PMC. It sees, okay, I triggered this command.
The PMC can't tell the PME to instantiate the PMC because the PMC doesn't exist yet. For example, there are absolutely things that can't be done that way.
Yeah, this bootstrapping problem needs to be solved for sure.
But I think the bigger issue is the fact that we would have to write a test PMC that knows every simulator.
No, that's exactly the point.
The setup for that, if you're looking at it from a vendor's point of view, like Michael's point of view, is to use the command-driven tester. So you start a process that opens a pipe from into the command-driven tester. You give it the initial command to start to start the test essentially, or to reset and then start the test. And then it will come back with textual output that you have to interpret and translate it to automatically. If you're sitting in between as a developer to figure out what it's sending you and how you best respond, that's a doable approach. But
Now, when you say automate, I suspect that the automation may bring from one simulator to the next to be quite different. Way you automate it.
yes, so that's not our.
That's not
But
that.
it's going to be way to code that in or script it in or something. How would that be?
No, rather the opposite. That would be your task to do based on the interaction with the command line.
Oh, okay.
And
As part of the development of
my understanding of the automation framework is that it enables you to do that. So you capture what you've done and it then remembers. But it's your responsibility to do that.
But that's if you're using a GUI-based, essentially action recording tool. Oliver is suggesting that you're actually not starting the GUI at all, but you're using Chrome automation or whatnot to programmatically go to an interface simulator. If you do that, you also need to start programmatically the command line interface and handle the dialogue.
Yes.
Yes, you need both of those.
They could put it possibly in other words. I think that the basic key is for sure we can have a procedure that is driven by the manual action of the developer, or the cycle or the communication between PMC and PME. But what we really need is, let's say, for us, automate it as much as possible that you can execute it automatically. And the question is for the PME vendors, how much do you rely on testing your PME, let's say, by automated tools?
Varies from about 5% to 90%.
Yeah,
based on the survey.
That varies quite a bit, but
It varies. Each vendor does different ways, different bits of parts of their system, and each vendors across all the vendors do massively different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
There is no one solution or one procedure that is used.
But we must squeeze in any of these systems in a way that we can support any of these systems that
Yes.
exist. So that's exactly the
It's
point.
almost the lowest common denominator, so it will support anything.
Well, the backup approach is that what Malcom is saying, you run the test manually as a human and you simply record all your actions and replay. That's essentially
That will work with everything.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we can do that would guarantee to work with everything?
I just want to make sure I'm clear. So essentially what you're saying is for the portion that actually does the automation, we would have to code that up ourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
And that will allow for uniqueness from simulator to simulator.
Yes. So the automation framework talks to the test controller. The test controller doesn't talk to the automation framework. There is no two-way communication.
Sergey,
As I understand, this will be a common-driven application or whatever else. And I have two questions with this concern. The first one, do you have a feeling how large this special type of language will be? How many keywords, commands, or whatever else you need to describe all the necessary situation? That is the first question. And the second one, as I understand, if such a language, script language, batch files or whatever else were really available, and this goes far beyond the goal of testing, because one could use this kind of interoperability just to create larger networks of CAPE-OPEN based applications that could communicate with each other, or even on this level without this additional layer of abstraction. Because what is then the restriction to do the test? If you can drive anything you want using different components under consideration, unilateration, PMEs, different PMEs, or whatever else. You can combine both of them using this.
We're not providing a script language at all. The command line interface will be one that adheres to human interaction, preferably with in and output that is machine parsable, so that you can. So
you have to fix some kind of format to store this input information just to replay it later, and this is a kind of script language.
no, that is a task that is specific to the simulation vendor.
Yeah,
That's
that's the
your
automation framework does.
The
Which
automation framework.
Which is the vendor specific. So that is the bit the vendor has to do, not us.
Not you. Okay.
That would be well outside of our scope to standardize
Yes.
things like that. Our primary target is to validate that the unit socket and the thermal socket are properly implemented. So we're trying to trick the agent, which could be the user, or it could be an automated agent programmed by the software vendor itself, into performing a sufficient amount of actions for us to validate.
There may be actions that you would never get by just dropping even a certified PMC into the flow sheet, because you can't guarantee the PME is going to exercise every interface that's been implemented on the PMC, whereas we are going to force it to do that.
So how we would force it, but
We are talking about unit and property package. Other things. There is no argument and not possible to instantiate a supervisor PMC without starting PME.
Okay, absolutely. You've got to start the PME to instantiate.
Yeah, but still you can, just as a login, you can catch all the interactions between the PMC and PME in the supervising. What is this test control in fact, what we do per problem?
no, starting the PME will certainly not be the task of the test controller. The task of the test controller is keeping track of instructing the agent on how to interact with the PME, so that the test PMC is exercised in an appropriate manner. So starting the PME, if anything, is part of an automation that is built by the software vendor, that solves the PME.
So if you don't use any of the automation process, it would be just a UI type process, then I think you would have to go to the thing.
Correct. If you're only testing a month, that would probably be your best option. Just run through the steps that are here on the screen.
Test regularly during the development process, for example, then you might want to automate it. And there are, from our survey of 2 years ago, there are vendors out there who don't automate anything. It's all done manually anyway. So,
And also as an end user, you might want to run a test. Unless you don't have the facility that the software developer does.
yes,
So you're kind of bound to do it. Unless you're really experienced with the software.
yes.
That's the bottom line. The key part of this is that the agent, if you're calling it a person, is doing the testing. The automation is just the nice to have. If you have the facility to automate what you've done once, then
This by providing you online control, you can,
future.
yes,
The reality is you don't need the automation.
online controller is simply there to allow you to communicate with the test controller, not by a graphical user interface, so that you can automate it.
Or do it remotely via terminal or
Yes,
on an Apple system or
I think it's more like the developers will want to do that anyway.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure about that. This is a nice to have. So if you think about unit testing and regular dates of your software, then the automation is a crucial point. So every time you release a new version of your PME, you would be interested not to sit and have a developer sitting in front of this thing and taking 5 hours to.
It depends how many things you have to do. If you
Yeah,
have to do 5 things,
Yeah,
if you've got 5,000, then it's a different story. So that's what I'm saying. It's a nice to have, but it all depends.
well, I would be honest.
Developers will quickly find a way to automate something if it's a pain.
And that's
From
true.
the developer side, it's probably a must-have from a proper development cycle point of view, because even if you have to do 3 things manually, chances
You
that
might
you
not
don't
do them.
because you're in a rush.
But if a vendor chooses not to automate what they're testing now, we don't want to force them to use automation using the CAPE-OPEN test suite. If a vendor chooses not to automate their testing, even if it's 5,000 keystrokes, my reading of the survey results is that some vendors haven't chosen to automate their testing at all, then the fact it's 5,000 keystrokes is just an additional 5,000 on top of however many million they're already having to do the testing.
Malcolm.
Did I hear a voice?
Yes, Malcolm? This is Harry.
Harry is online.
He's online. We can just about hear you.
Speak louder.
Is this better?
That's better.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you talked to any of the vendors as to how they would like to do the testing? I mean, Aspen or Pro2 or Unisim, Honeywell?
No, because I've not managed to make none of them are talking to me.
Say that again?
None of them are talking to me. They won't respond, which is an interesting one.
I think this is clearly something that then must be mitigated.
What do you
Somehow.
mean by that?
I mean, we test their software, or we want to test their software, and then we should be including them in the process, right? So there should be we have one of these people on the call, right, Krishna?
We have Aviva, I guess, on this call, but
Yeah.
the point is that you can't force people to provide their input if they don't want. They have been invited to provide their input.
Yeah, but we have one on the call right now, so we can ask their input right now.
Which number is still on the call? No.
Yeah, we'll provide the feedback, but we are not into it now. So when time comes, definitely we'll provide the feedback.
But what is your preference?
No, we are not looked at it at this point of time. We are not spending time on that. That's what I can say.
So you have no feedback as yet.
Yes.
Your answer. Yes. I thought that's what it was. But yes, Harry, we do need to get feedback, but I think we have a historical issue here for the last few years about getting interactions from the major vendors. The vendors who are in this call and the smaller vendors are doing a very good job of giving us feedback.
I mean, we had a couple of discussions, I think, years ago, right? Where they also indicated they're willing to communicate. I mean, there's also a lot of time passed since then.
Yes.
So maybe we have to simply re-invoke more or less that communication channel with the right people. So maybe that's the action we should do together, Malcolm. Yeah?
Yes.
Because we had some names, but I'm not sure whether they moved on.
Yes.
If you recall, at least with some of the companies which were really dedicated to testing their software.
Did ask the question to the management board about one of our vendors.
Yes.
Never got an answer.
But I think it's easier to come up with a proposal.
Yes.
Than actually
Yes.
we
Which was
need to have to tell
which has been the intent of the conversation.
portfolio managers on software products again, right?
Yeah, it has been the intent of the conversations I've been having with the vendors I have spoken to, is to come with the proposal and talk it through with them.
Yeah, there is specific software for this that emulates mouse clicks and keystrokes to the exact position on the screen. So you can record the session and then it will be replayed exactly again.
Yep, which is one example of the automation framework we're talking about here. But we are leaving, the current design is that we are leaving the automation framework to the vendor, because they will some vendors already have chosen an automation framework. Every vendor who has chosen a different one.
So you have an overview of the tools that they use? You received that in their feedback?
I had that from a survey we did a couple of years back. You were included in it, I believe.
Yeah. But they
So
all use the different tool.
results. We know roughly what all the vendors do,
Okay.
but I'm not sharing it with this room because obviously that is vendor confidential information. But I can say that every vendor does something different,
Yeah.
and they use different tools where they use tools. So us saying you need to use this tool is not the right solution because it won't fit with each individual vendor's current testing.
But I guess there is no standard, which are standard input or standard
No.
data is data, which could be input in an automated stuff.
Yeah.
While CO-LaN could indeed use this or that piece of software and record what's going on, but for what purpose if the output of that is not going to be of any use afterwards by this or that vendor? So.
Okay.
Hence the design.
Martin.
Just one question. The idea is to have a way to control the PME. Okay. Or why not a new interface specification, VIP address, some standard methods, create a stream, to instantiate a unit operation, perform the connection, so to have an interface specification for the PME. To control the PME from the outside, that could be very useful for additional check, like performance of optimization with optimization on a PME or things like that. So it could be also useful to have a PME CAPE-OPEN interface. On the other hand, to construct automatically some flow sheet, something like that on the long.
And this goes back to what we will hear from David Cameron tomorrow, because the point is we have the flow sheet monitoring staff who is in fact able to get the information from the flow sheet, but which is not able and not designed to make modification to a flow sheet by adding a unit operation, removing one, adding a stream, and so on. Would that be, and this is something that is needed in the way when you are going between the PFD and a flow sheet. It is something that when you are wanting to move in a PFD information to a flow sheet, you need to have kind of. Now, is that what I would guess? That adding new interfaces on the PME is something that you need really to the PME vendors to go on board with that.
Yes, we've discussed that as a possibility.
Just because the flow sheet monitoring interface specification, which has been released quite a while ago, discussed quite a few years, the only implementation that we know of on the PME side is in COFI, right?
Yes, but there's the assumption there already that your PME is actually a flow sheeter. If it is just any application that exercises thermal, that you still want to test for compliance, you cannot add a stream. There's no such concept. It is PME is much more abstract than you would.
But this is also exactly my question. Why do we then want to catch somehow user interaction during flow sheeting? Is it really the goal just to record everything what the user does to create and to start some kind of simulation? Is it not too much? Is it really what we want to have? To track everything the user.
Well, it's not exactly what track everything, but the difficulty with each PME, in order to force a PME to do something, you have the path to do something, to make the PME do something that is of interest for a test. Is not the same in each PME, and sometimes it's rather convoluted to because the point here is for a test to run. In order to get a success.
Practically all PMEs, I would suppose, there is an option load already existing project and just run it without any additional interaction with the user. Is it not sufficient, at least for the first tests of compliance here?
For a unit operation, you would get a long way because during calculated unit operations in control and can exercise the thermal exposed by the material in any way it sees fit. But
that means that the interaction with the user, with the end user, is practically no interaction.
Unit operation.
Just
You still need to connect ports. You need to check that
if your project is already existing.
well, you need to test the ability to connect. ports.
And this is my question, do we really want to test all this elementary configuration?
Have the clients on the
That is
ability
my
to
question.
connect
We
the
need,
stream
to
to the port.
we need to test, for example, the fact that when, in fact, there is a change on the ports of a unit operation by adding or removing a port, by changing the number of ports on the unit operation, things like that. You need, after these changes have been made when configuring the unit operation, you need to be sure that the PME is trying to get back all this information immediately after these changes. If we add the cases where, in fact, this information is not retrieved back by the PME after such changes, or it should do that. If there was a change in the configuration of a unit operation, the PME has immediately to figure out what are these changes. And this, you can test that not through something which is already existing, a flow sheet already existing. It is by the fact that you are changing something in the flow sheet that you should prompt by the PME a behavior that has to be tested.
That's also where the agent feedback comes in. We have no way of verifying that the PME actually does that other than asking the agent, is port number 3 available?
So
It will be great if everything will work, including
be
every
confident.
individual click of the user. It will be great. The question is whether it is of the highest priority to check, to validate all this.
Yeah, but for a number of very important things, it seems that we need a kind of user interaction which can be automated or not automated.
If I go back 20 years, show my age here, and we go back to the interoperability
That's course.
workshops that we did at these meetings, initially, when people implemented, we couldn't even connect a stream in the PME to the port of the CAPE-OPEN unit operation because the CAPE-OPEN interface had not been implemented correctly. So testing that is fundamental to interoperability.
This is
so you've got to
fundamental,
test it.
but you will see that most likely immediately on the screen as the end user if something goes wrong in the user interface. What the user will not see is really what happens during the simulation. If something is wrong on the graphical user interface,
But the
it's more or less
the
easy to
developer of a
detect.
PME won't see how it works with all components. We had examples where it worked with some components and not others because there was a flaw. So you've got to test that implementation in the same way as we're finding implementation issues with the PMC interfaces because they've never been exercised. There's the same sort of thing here that a developer can only exercise using the PMCs that they've got available to.
For the sake of moving to people who are virtually going to make presentation, I guess I would, I think, say that if you want to continue this conversation, the conference dinner is a good place to do that, I guess. Malcolm, thank you again for presenting the
Thank you.
the first ideas about the CAPE-OPEN test suite for PMEs.